bit of Raw talk today. I'm going to be talking about UFC Fight Night in Phoenix, which features the comeback of the great Cain Velasquez, and he's fighting Francis Ngannou, which should be fireworks. Also on the fight card, you have a bunch of good fights. I'm just quickly going to go through these because I want to talk about the main event in a bit more detail. You got Jimmy Rivera versus Aljamain Sterling, which is a great fight. And I like Jimmy Rivera in that one. I think he'll win via decision. Andre Fili versus Miles Jury also. I'm going to say Miles Jury wins via decision. Cynthia Calvillo is also fighting. She's a very good fighter. Very well-rounded as well. She's fighting Courtney Casey, which I'm not too familiar with her, but I like Cynthia Calvillo. She's a very complete fighter, in my opinion, pound for pound. Probably the best fighter that's coming out of Alpha Male right now. And then the co-main event is also should be fireworks. You have James Vick versus Paul Felder. Two excellent strikers, stand-up fighters, and I'm expecting lots of fancy and creative stuff, especially from Paul Felder. And I'm going to say he actually wins that fight. I'm going to say Paul Felder wins via decision. Now, the main event is absolutely incredible. I'm really fascinated by this fight because there are a few critical components that could really impact the fight, in my opinion. So we all know Ngannou was on an absolute tear about 2 years ago, arguably the scariest fighter in the UFC roster at the time. Everyone was afraid of him, everyone hyped him up, and then he lost to Stipe in the big fight for the title. He lost a lot of confidence from that fight, and then that led on to one of the worst fights in heavyweight history when he fought Derek Lewis not too long ago. Since then, though, he's sort of back to his old self. He knocked out Curtis Blades in 40 seconds in China, and this win was important because they literally paired him up with his worst matchup possible. Curtis Blades he's got decent stand-up, not incredible, but his main game is wrestling. He's an incredible wrestler. He's obviously got cardio, and his plan was to take Ngannou down and exploit his weaknesses. But Ngannou came back and he won in 40 seconds. So he's got a bit of momentum going into this fight. Cain, on the other hand, has been out for nearly 3 years now, and those 3 years have been not easy for him because he's been riddled with injuries or recovering from injuries. I think he had neck issues, back issues, knee issues. I think his whole rib cage had to be worked on. So just injuries upon injuries constantly. And despite all those injuries, he's still regarded as one of the best heavyweights of all time. So that just shows that even though he's barely fought in the last 5 years, people still regard him as the guy for heavyweights, which shows how incredible how incredible he is at fighting. Now everyone knows that Cain is a very good wrestler, All-American, arguably the best wrestler in the division's history, and he's a cardio machine. He can go fight 5 rounds easily. The two things that we've seen that Ngannou struggle with is, and especially against Stipe, is wrestling and it is cardio. So that's one of the reasons why I love this fight. Now, in my opinion, I think Cain, in his prime, if he fought Ngannou, he would have finished him. He would have beat him up worse than Stipe did. I think Stipe fought a good fight against Ngannou. He did what he had to do. People, keep criticizing Ngannou about his wrestling and cardio, but I don't think he did that bad in that fight. Yes, he got outclassed, but that's because Stipe made the fight his fight. He constantly took him down. He didn't damage him too much. Ngannou was still fine after 5 rounds. He was just exhausted. He couldn't handle the wrestling and the 5 rounds. So, in my opinion, I think Kane in his prime, I think he beats up Ngannou worse than Stipe did. But despite his wrestling credentials, Kane does like to sort of stand and bang with his opponents. He likes to take his chances on the feet. Even though he's a good striker, he doesn't need to do that, and he especially doesn't need to do that against someone like Ngannou, who it only takes one punch from him. So for me, this fight is really hard to call because we haven't seen Kane in so long. Like if Kane fought, let's say 6 months ago, and he looked good, he looked like the old Kane, then I would have liked his chances again to win this fight. But 3 years out, riddled with injuries, I just have a strong feeling that Francis Ngannou will be too much. I think it's a bad fight to come back to because it only takes one punch from Ngannou and you're out. So I could easily be wrong. It all depends on what Kane comes back. If he comes back his old self, I wouldn't be surprised if he wins. But based on what I know, based on the fact that he's been out for 3 years, lots of injuries, and Ngannou has been, fighting more recently, I'm going to say that he wins via knockout in the first round. So that's all for today. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe. See you next time.